Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you some stories about cheating. The first story, the saccharine scent clung to Arthur like a guilty conscience. He could still taste the sickly sweetness of the caramel kisses Bethany, the saleswoman at Sugar Rush, had pressed into his hand, the flavor a perverse parody of the sourness that had settled in his stomach. He adjusted his tie, the crisp silk suddenly feeling like a noose. Arthur had always considered himself a man of routine, a creature of habit. Wife, kids, mortgage, predictable days at the accounting firm. His life with Eleanor was a comfortable, well-worn shoe. Beautiful, yes, but lacking the vibrant, impulsive spark he suddenly craved. The first encounter had been innocent. A simple purchase of gummy bears for their daughter, Lily. Then, a charming smile from Bethany, a shared laugh about the absurdity of black licorice, a return visit to restock on Lily's favorites. Each time, the conversation lingered longer, the air a little lighter, the smile a little wider. He justified it as friendly banter, a harmless escape from the predictable rhythm of his life. Then came the caramel kisses. Bethany was young, barely out of her 20s, with eyes that sparkled like rock candy and a laugh that tinkled like jingle bells. She saw him, truly saw him, in a way Eleanor hadn't in years. Or perhaps, he thought with a pang of guilt, Eleanor had simply stopped trying to see him. The affair was brief, a sugary rush quickly turning bitter. A few stolen afternoons, clandestine phone calls, the weight of lies pressing down on him like a mountain of fudge. The sex was, okay. Not life-altering, not the earth-shattering experience his fantasy had painted. It was, in fact, surprisingly awkward, the taste of cheap candy and regret mingling on his tongue that he ended it as abruptly as it began. He couldn't bear the thought of hurting Eleanor, of fracturing the carefully constructed world they had built together. He told Bethany it was a mistake, that he was a married man, a father. She looked at him with a flash of hurt, then resignation. The sweetness in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, professional politeness. Now, standing at the kitchen counter, he watched Eleanor meticulously peel an orange, each segment neatly separated. He wanted to tell her, to confess the truth and beg for forgiveness. But the words caught in his throat, choked by fear, by the knowledge that he had broken something precious. Eleanor glanced up, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Lily wants to go to that new candy store downtown," she said, her voice light. "Sugar Rush, I think it's called. Maybe we can take her this weekend?" Arthur's stomach plummeted. He couldn't go back there, couldn't face Bethany's knowing gaze, the sugary air thick with the memory of his transgression. Maybe not," he stammered, avoiding her eyes. "It's probably just overpriced candy." Eleanor frowned, her brow furrowing slightly. "Lily would love it. And besides," she added, popping a segment of orange into her mouth, "a little sweetness never hurt anyone." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Arthur stared at his hands, the faint scent of caramel still clinging to his skin. He knew he couldn't hide forever. The truth, like a piece of hard candy lodged in his throat, would eventually have to come up. And when it did, he feared the sweetness would be replaced by a bitterness that would last a lifetime. He had traded the comfortable predictability of his life for a fleeting moment of sugary delight, and he was now paying the price, one bitter, regretful bite at a time. The second story, the scent of sandalwood and regret clung to the air in their meticulously organized living room. Amelia traced the rim of her wine glass, the ruby liquid mirroring the turmoil churning inside her. Outside, the June evening hummed with the lazy drone of cicadas, a stark contrast to the metallic screech that had become the soundtrack to her unraveling. Mark, her husband of 8 years, was a man of spreadsheets and routine. Comforting, reliable, predictable. He knew her coffee order by heart, remembered every anniversary, and could fix a leaky faucet with a stoic, quiet competence. He was, in the most fundamental ways, good, but good had become suffocating. Good had become beige. Then, Liam, the electric guitarist, had blown into her life like a rogue amp stack. He played at the dive bar down the street, a place Amelia had only ventured into out of a desperate need to break the monotony. Liam's music was raw, visceral, a primal howl that resonated with a part of her she thought had long atrophied. He was all leather and ink, a swirl of chaotic energy contained within a wiry frame. His fingers flew across the fretboard, conjuring sounds that were both heartbreaking and electrifying. He looked at her, really looked at her, with eyes that saw past the carefully constructed facade of a suburban wife, and she had let him. It started with after-gig beers, fueled by adrenaline and the intoxicating rhythm of shared passion. Then came stolen kisses in dimly lit alleys, the rasp of his stubble against her skin a stark rebellion against the smooth, predictable comfort of Mark's touch. Finally, it escalated to secret afternoons spent in his cluttered apartment, the air thick with the scent of patchouli and the echo of his guitar. Liam offered her a world painted in vibrant, dangerous hues. He saw the artist buried beneath the layers of responsibility, the woman who yearned for more than PTA meetings and sensible shoes. He made her feel alive, electric, like she was finally shedding the skin of the person she had become, but the guilt was a constant, gnawing companion. Every shared laugh with Mark felt like a betrayal. Every casual touch filled her with a sickening mix of shame and longing. She was living a double life, a carefully constructed house of cards threatening to collapse with the slightest tremor. Tonight, Mark was late from work. Amelia had used the time to meticulously clean, trying to scrub away the scent of Liam, the residue of her transgression. As she waited, she saw herself reflected in the polished surfaces, a woman fractured, her reflection shattered into 1,000 painful pieces. When Mark finally arrived, his tie loosened and his face etched with fatigue, he didn't notice the tremor in her hands as she poured him a glass of wine. He just sighed and sank into his usual armchair, the familiar creak a sound that echoed her own internal collapse. "Long day," he mumbled, taking a sip. "Anything interesting happen today?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Amelia stared at him, at the man she had promised to love and honor, a man who deserved so much more than she was capable of giving him. She could lie. She could continue to play the part of the dutiful wife, burying her secret deeper, hoping it would eventually wither and die, but the guilt had become unbearable. The weight of her deception was crushing her. Taking a deep breath, she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Mark, we need to talk." The words hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken truths. As Mark looked up, his face a mask of weary confusion, Amelia knew that the music had finally stopped. The concert was over. And the final, painful act of her betrayal was about to begin. The notes she was about to play would be the most dissonant, the most devastating of all. The third story. The scent of lilies, Philip's favorite, hung heavy in the air, a pathetic attempt to mask the lingering aroma of cheap cologne and fear. Isabella traced the rim of her champagne flute, the crystal cold against her trembling fingers. Philip was due home any minute. He was predictable, bless his heart, always home by 6, a creature of habit in a world spinning wildly out of her control. She hated herself. Loathed the taste of the Dom Perignon, the opulent silk of her dress, the sheer, unadulterated guilt that choked her. She, Isabella Moretti, wife of the respectable accountant Philip Moretti, had betrayed him in the most unforgivable way. It had started innocently enough. An invitation to a charity gala, Philip pleading a late night at the office. Alone, she'd found herself drawn to the magnetic presence of Alessandro Rossi. His eyes, the color of dark espresso, had lingered on her a beat too long. His voice, a low rumble that vibrated through her, promised a danger she'd never known she craved. Alessandro Rossi was a whisper on the wind, a legend in the underbelly of the city. Everyone knew, or at least suspected, he was a capo, a powerful figure in the Italian mafia. Philip, a man who meticulously balanced his checkbook, would have been horrified, but that night, in the glittering ballroom, the danger had been the allure. He'd courted her with a predatory grace, showering her with compliments that painted her as a woman of fire and passion, a woman Philip never seemed to see. He had seen her, Isabella, not just Mrs. Moretti. One dance became two, then a stolen moment on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below like fallen stars. The kiss had ignited a blaze she thought long extinguished. It was a reckless, desperate act, driven by a yearning she couldn't name, and then, it happened. 1 week later, a clandestine meeting at a secluded restaurant, the air thick with unspoken promises. He'd taken her to a penthouse overlooking the city, a vista of glittering lights and stolen glances. The details were now a blurred, shameful montage. The raw passion, the utter disregard for consequence. It had been terrifying and exhilarating, a descent into a darkness she never knew existed within her. Now, sitting in her pristine living room, the betrayal felt like a physical weight on her chest. Philip was a good man, a kind man, a man who loved her unconditionally. He deserved honesty, not this charade. The key turned in the lock. Philip entered, his face etched with the weariness of a long day. He smiled at her, a tired, loving smile that felt like a stab wound. "Hey, honey. You look beautiful." He leaned in to kiss her cheek, a familiar scent of paper and aftershave filling her senses. She recoiled slightly, a flicker of hesitation he didn't seem to notice. "Hi, Philip. How was work?" The conversation flowed, a familiar script of daily routines and mundane concerns. With every word, the guilt gnawed at her. Confession burned on her tongue, but the fear of losing Philip, of shattering his world, held her captive. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay rigid beside Philip, the silence amplified by the enormity of her secret. The next morning, a single red rose, without a card, sat on her doorstep. The scent was intoxicating, a stark reminder of the power Alessandro Rossi wielded, the silent thread embedded in its beauty. The affair continued, a dangerous dance on the edge of a volcano. Meetings became more frequent, more desperate. Alessandro was possessive, demanding, his charm laced with a steel-edged control. She was caught in a web of his making, a gilded cage built on lies and stolen moments. One night, Alessandro revealed his true nature. "Philip," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "he is a problem. He knows nothing, but he might begin to suspect. I can take care of it." The blood ran cold in Isabella's veins. This wasn't a romantic fling. This was the mafia. This was real. The weight of her actions crashed down on her, crushing her with its force. "No," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "No, Alessandro, you can't. I won't let you." He smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. "You have given me so much, Isabella. I would hate to think you are ungrateful." She knew then that she was trapped, a pawn in his game. She had to protect Philip, even if it meant sacrificing herself. The next day, she packed a small bag, leaving behind a note for Philip, a jumbled mess of apologies and explanations she knew would never truly convey the depth of her shame. She met Alessandro at the penthouse, the city lights now mocking her, a glittering testament to her foolish choices. He was waiting for her, a glass of champagne in his hand. "You have made the right decision, Isabella," he said, his eyes cold and devoid of emotion. She knew then that she had traded one cage for another, a gilded hell where love and loyalty had no place. She had chosen the darkness, and now she had to live with its consequences. Philip would hate her. But at least he would be alive. And maybe, just maybe, one day, he would understand that she did it all for him. The scent of lilies, now just a distant memory, faded into the bitter taste of regret. Her only solace was knowing Philip was safe, even if forever he would be safe from her. The fourth story. The rain hammered against the windows of their suburban Connecticut home, a relentless drumming that mirrored the uneased thrumming in Eleanor's chest. Outside, the manicured lawns and perfectly symmetrical houses blurred into a gray wash. Inside, the familiar scent of Earl Grey tea and beeswax polish felt suffocating, a cage built of domestic expectation. Eleanor stirred her tea, the clinking of the spoon against porcelain a fragile sound in the oppressive silence. For years, she had played the part of the devoted wife, the attentive mother. She'd hosted dinner parties, volunteered at the school, and cheered Mark on during his weekend golf games. She had built a life of quiet, comfortable respectability. But beneath the surface, a restlessness had begun to gnaw at her soul. It started with a trip to Chinatown in New York. Mark was away on a business trip, and Eleanor, feeling particularly adrift, decided to explore a world so different from her own. She wandered through bustling markets, inhaling the pungent aromas of spices and unfamiliar herbs. And then she met him. His name was Wei. He was a vendor, selling intricately carved wooden toys from a small stall overflowing with colorful kites and painted dragons. He was older, his face etched with the wisdom of experience, his eyes holding a warmth that felt like a sunbeam in the crowded street. They spoke for hours, not deeply, not intimately, but about everything and nothing. About the craftsmanship of the toys, the history of the neighborhood, the simple pleasures of a perfectly brewed cup of jasmine tea. Wei had 7 children, a boisterous, loving brood that spilled out from the doorway of their tiny apartment above the shop. They were loud, messy, and full of life, a stark contrast to the carefully curated silence of Eleanor's own home. Over the next few months, Eleanor found herself drawn back to Chinatown, to Wei, to the vibrant chaotic beauty of his life. Their connection deepened slowly, cautiously, a silent understanding that bloomed in the shared glances and stolen moments. It was a connection built not on grand declarations of love, but on quiet acceptance and a shared appreciation for the beauty of the everyday. The inevitable happened. One rainy afternoon, amidst the scent of sandalwood and the murmur of Cantonese, they kissed. It was a kiss that tasted of longing, of forbidden fruit. The affair was a messy, complicated tangle of guilt and exhilaration. Eleanor knew it was wrong, that she was betraying Mark, her family, everything she held dear. But the feeling of being truly seen, of being alive, was too intoxicating to resist. Wei offered her a glimpse of a life unbound by expectation, a life filled with passion and connection. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the storm brewing within Eleanor. The guilt was eating her alive. She pictured Mark, so kind and predictable, oblivious to the chasm that had opened beneath their feet. She envisioned her children, their trusting faces, shattered by the revelation of her betrayal. One evening, Wei invited her to dinner at his apartment. The noise was deafening. Children shrieked, laughed, and chased each other through the crowded rooms. The air was thick with the aroma of soy sauce and ginger. Eleanor sat at the crowded table, surrounded by this chaotic, loving family, and a profound sense of isolation washed over her. She didn't belong here. She was an outsider, a fleeting visitor in a world she could never truly understand. And the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She didn't want to dismantle her life. She didn't want to trade the quiet security of her suburban existence for the unpredictable chaos of Wei's. She simply wanted to feel alive again. The next day, Eleanor ended the affair. The conversation was brief, painful, and filled with a quiet sadness. Wei understood. He had known from the beginning that their connection was fragile, a fleeting moment in time. She went home and told Mark. The confession was a torrent of tears and regret, a desperate plea for forgiveness. Mark was devastated, his world shattered. The ensuing weeks were a blur of anger, accusations, and heartbreaking silences. He moved out, taking with him the comfortable predictability that had defined their marriage. Eleanor was left alone in the echoing silence of her house, the rain still falling outside. She had lost everything, her husband, her lover, and the illusion of a perfect life, but amidst the wreckage, a faint glimmer of hope flickered. She had finally acknowledged the truth of her own desires. She had dared to step outside the confines of her carefully constructed reality. The future was uncertain, terrifying even. But for the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt a sense of purpose, a determination to rebuild her life, not into the image she had always been expected to portray, but into the authentic, flawed, and ultimately resilient woman she was meant to be. The rain still fell, but now, she felt a strange sense of peace, the knowledge that even in the midst of the storm, there was still the possibility of sunshine. And she would find it. The fifth story. The crisp white duvet felt like a stranger against Amelia's skin. Beside her, Liam slept soundly, his breath a steady, rhythmic tide that usually lulled her to peace. Tonight, it felt like a mocking reminder of his betrayal. The Instagram post had been innocuous enough at first glance. A picture of Liam, laughing, the sun glinting in his hair, holding a cocktail at a rooftop bar. The caption read, "Drinks and Dreams with at Liam K. Redheart #City Adventures #Sponsored Content #He is Awesome." The account? Wanderlust with Willow, a travel and lifestyle blogger with 1 million followers and a penchant for perfectly curated experiences. Amelia wasn't jealous of Willow, not exactly. She was jealous of the carefree, vibrant woman Liam seemed to be interacting with. The woman who evoked that heart eye emoji. She hadn't seen that look on his face, directed at her. In what felt like forever, Liam was a marketing executive, and Amelia, a successful architect. They were a power couple, everyone said. They had the perfect house, the perfect lives, the perfect facade. The truth was, perfection had become a prison. Their conversations were shallow, punctuated by the ping of notifications and the demands of their careers. Romance had withered into routine. They existed alongside each other, not with each other. The next few days were a blur of silent accusations and simmering resentment. Liam, oblivious, prattled on about the marketing campaign he was working on, the one that involved sponsoring various influencers, including Willow. Amelia couldn't bring herself to confront him directly. The fear of confirmation, of the carefully constructed world crumbling around her, was paralyzing. Instead, she became a detective, meticulously scrolling through Willow's feed, dissecting every comment, every like, searching for clues. She found them. Not explicit confessions of love, but subtle hints. A photo of Liam's hand resting on a table, a distinctive silver ring glinting in the light. Another of a coffee shop, captioned, "Morning Fuel with a New Friend," the background suspiciously resembling a cafe he often frequented. Finally, the dam broke. During a strained dinner, Amelia slammed her fork down. "I know about Willow," she said, her voice trembling. Liam's face drained of color. He stammered, tried to deny it, then finally confessed. He admitted to a series of working lunches, a shared cab ride, a late-night phone call after a particularly stressful day. He claimed it was just flirting. A harmless escape. Harmless? Amelia choked back a sob. Harmless to you, maybe. But it's shattered everything for me. The following weeks were agonizing. Counseling sessions felt like interrogations. Each conversation was a minefield of accusations, apologies, and tears. Liam insisted it was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. He swore he loved her. He begged for forgiveness. Amelia wanted to believe him. She wanted to recapture the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had gazed at her with such adoration. But the image of Liam, laughing and carefree with Willow, was seared into her mind. She began to rebuild, not the relationship, but herself. She threw herself into her work, rediscovered old hobbies, and started going to yoga. She found solace in the company of her friends, women who had faced their own battles and emerged stronger. One evening, months later, Amelia was at a gallery opening, admiring a breathtaking sculpture. She felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Liam. He looked thinner, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. He apologized again, his voice sincere. He said he understood if she couldn't forgive him. He just wanted her to know that he was working on himself, trying to be a better person. Amelia looked at him, really looked at him, without the bitterness and hurt clouding her vision. She saw the man she had loved, but she also saw the man he had become, flawed, vulnerable, and deeply remorseful. "I'm not sure what the future holds, Liam," she said softly. "But I'm willing to consider healing. Not forgetting, but healing." The road ahead was uncertain. Maybe they could rebuild something stronger, something more authentic. Maybe they couldn't. But Amelia knew one thing for sure: she was done living a perfect lie. She was ready to embrace the messy, complicated, and ultimately, more fulfilling truth of her own life. And that, she realized, was a journey worth taking, with or without Liam. The ghost of Wanderlust with Willow still lingered, but it no longer had the power to define her.